So today we're going to go through the Combine Clients wizard and changing the client type via the client menu, Change Client Types wizard. Before we launch into the wizards themselves, I wanted to take the opportunity to remind everybody about the knowledge base. This area of the Intersoft website is particularly useful where you come across an area of FinPower Connect that is not behaving as expected. A keyword search can be run on the knowledge base, as I'm sure we all know, but this can often provide the answer you seek if the behaviour has already been found or corrected or changed by a job. The reason I'm mentioning this now is because the Combine Client wizard and associated processes was an area where this was occurring recently. And in this image here, you can see from the search I've run for Combine Clients, albeit only displaying the high importance jobs, for the purposes of this demonstration, you can see here that this job here identifies some unexpected behaviour, or as we like to call it, an unexpected feature. So in some versions prior to 3.4.2, an error would occur where the client had an employment record as detailed here in the knowledge base article itself. So as mentioned, a really useful tool to go straight to if you think, oh, that's not quite working as I expected, or that's not doing what it should, or it's just straight failing. Go straight there, and if in doubt, contact application support. So moving on to the Combine Clients wizard itself, typically this is required where a client has been accidentally duplicated or created by a user, not realizing a client record already exists, or where an applicant has been converted to being a client where the applicant already has a client record. And to cater for these scenarios, we have the Combine Client wizard, located as previously mentioned in the client menu. So this allows one client to be merged into another. There are a few things to be aware of with this process, which I'll cover as we progress through the wizard. I've got an example here to look at. And on the first page of the wizard, we can see the option to select our main client. This is our retained record post-merge. There's also this checkbox here that says main client has priority. This is one of the important things to be aware of. Further on in the wizard, set fields appear that you can choose between for which value should be retained. By default, the client with priority will be ticked, which we'll go through when we get to that page. But for any fields that do not appear in this grid, the client with priorities information should be the one that is retained. On the next page, we select the record for the client we wish to merge with our main client. In this case, I want to merge this one here. Any additional potential matches will also appear in the grid below, which is really useful for highlighting any other duplicates that exist, for cleaning up data, or for highlighting potentially some business processes or practices that are repeatedly causing multiple records. For example, if you're importing client information from an external source, like a custom application form, with no appropriate checks and balances in place to prevent loading said duplicates. Once we click Next again, we get to our Merge Options page that I touched on earlier. As you can see, where the information is able to be updated, we have the priority information here to be used in blue and some checkboxes available. Where there is available options to have more than one of a type, for example, addresses, you can't have more than one date of birth as an example, the additional information will be added to the record rather than deleted. We can use these tick boxes to override things. So for example, if we actually wanted to retain the mobile number for the client we are merging with and the email address, we can use these check boxes to override what has been selected by default. Once we click the merge button, we'll get a warning that our client C10014 will be permanently deleted. And that's important to double check as well. Once we click OK, we receive the confirmation that the merge has been successful. And then we can do a quick check of our client to make sure that we're seeing what we expect. So we can see here the mobile has been updated, as has the email address. But in addition to that, we get logs that go over what has been changed, including this one here, which is a helpful little summary. And of course, we've got audit logs as well. That covers off all the changes that have occurred. So that's the combined client wizard in a nutshell. Moving on to the client type change wizard, also located in the client menu. This wizard allows the user to change the client type where the client was added with the wrong type under the wrong client class. For example, an individual was added where it should have been a company. This is the only way in the FinPower Connect user interface where the type can be changed across different client classes. Though it is important to note there are some instances where a client cannot be changed in this way or across client class. The first being a client that is linked to an external party or branch known as a special client, and the second being a client with linked employment information or organisation personnel. In these cases, you will get a warning. For example, if we have a look at our friend Amelia's sample, we'll get this warning here that we cannot change the client type if the client has employment history. If we look at Dave's lawn mowing as an example, we can, which we'll go through in a minute. But if we have a look at Devon's shop, where did he go? We get the organisation warning here. So back to Dave's lawn mowing. We can see from this list here that we have the ability to change him from sole trader to an individual. So sole trader being an organisation class client type. Now there are things to be aware of here, and we will get a warning, or we should get a warning, or a failure. There are certain dependencies that you need to be aware of. In this case, we can see that the tax category is not listed as available for this client type. If we have a look at Dave's lawn mowing, under tax and banking, we can see that rightfully they are under a company tax category. Now we can't change that because of the client type. So that means we need to go to the client type itself that we want to change him to and temporarily make this tax category available. This is one of the reasons why this should only really be done with caution, as moving clients across class is not a great idea or should be avoided if at all possible. Now if we retry this, we can see it's gone through with no issue. If we double check our friend here, we can see he's now reverted to Dave Smith and he's an individual. So there's also, now that we've covered how to change the client type across classes, we'll briefly touch on how to change the type between the same class or for the exception to this rule. So the exception to the rule is deceased individual. As we can see here, it's got its own class. So there's individual, deceased, well, it's technically deceased individual is an individual, but it appears like it's got its own class. So there may be a reason you need to change a client from individual to deceased individual, even if they have employment records, obviously, in the case where they become deceased. So the client type change wizard won't allow you to do this, but you can, in edit mode on the general page, change that here, and we should get the applicable warnings and things, but I already changed this one previously that we showed in a previous session. If we look at the broker company for an example and go into edit mode, we can see under client type that we've got multiple options available to change them from, and they are all under the class of organisation. So that's really it today. There are some additional areas like permissions to control what users can and cannot complete for these functions, as we covered in our session on permissions specifically, but these are all we are covering today. In our next session, the code team will be covering some much more exciting code-related topics, which Martin will brief you on early next week.